The idiocy of infinite ult looping. Now, I've already had my opinion about this, both on community posts a few weeks back and on stream, right? Infinite ult loops is purely the Hoyo devs completely fucking up in terms of character kit creation and thinking that certain kits where an entire team can generate resources without taking a single turn wouldn't come to bite them back in the ass in the future with their power creep type of, kind of consistency, right? This is why infinite ult loops exist. As you guys know, there's RMC. If they made it so that there was a cap to the amount of energy that RMC could receive per ally turn, there would be no RMC infinite ult loops, and we never would have had as many issues with the Saber Gilga beta, although there'd still be infinite ult loops because there's some without RMC with a newer character, right? But you kind of get the gist of it. Because they didn't think of the future and only thought of the character's kit and how it worked in the present at that time, they weren't prepared for how it would end up in the future. And for those who don't know, gacha game devs can't really change characters after they're already officially released, because at this point, people have probably spent money, right? Not necessarily just RMC, but for example, two other characters who work for Infinite Ult Loops pretty decently is Tribi, because of her gaining free energy from allies attacking frequently, and then also M-Blade and especially his E2, right? These two are kind of the main ones behind a majority of the Infinite Ult Loops currently, and they cannot get changed. I'm pretty sure it's legit illegal for them to actually nerf a character in any type of way unless they compensate you in some way for it, right? So currently there's a lot of infinite ult loops that are using Tribi, and guess what, like E2 and E6 M-Blade. And it's because of their incredibly high attack frequency and the fact that high attack frequency from other allies can lead to energy being generated for each of them, right? So you put them on Eagle, you keep making them attack spam, Tribi has DDD, and so on and so on. It goes how it goes. Truthfully, it is just the idiocy of these Hoyo devs for not being able to see into the future in the slightest, and because of their antics of wanting to constantly increase the power creep every version, in turn making characters stronger, their QOL stronger and more convenient, the way they function more smoothly, this has led to infinite ult loops that they never planned to happen originally, right? Now, here's the thing. At least in my opinion, although infinite ult loops obviously sucks for the devs and is good for the player, infinite ult loops aren't all too game breaking, at least in this day and age, right? The reason I say this is basically the only time an infinite ult loop would actually have any type of high value is probably for AA Plight and AA, right? Like the King. Because the reality is most endgame modes now, especially with the introduction of Star Wars mode, do require 3 teams to fully complete. So even if you have one stupidly invested in team, right, most of these infinite ult loop teams are basically hitting the 20 cost plus mark, which would take most free-to-play players 2 years to even try and achieve, not including the fact that some of these characters might not even appear on rerun banners anymore, right? But you then have 2 other sections of endgame to actually clear before you actually kind of go ahead with this entire thing, right? So for this reason, honestly, infinite ult loops aren't actually as big of a deal unless you're talking about AA King and AA Plight. However, the other thing is usually there's a caveat to a majority of these infinite ult loops in which characters need kill energy or they need a permanent amount of high targets on the field, which usually is actually quite unrealistic because in most, like 95% of endgame, right? Sure, there might be a few mobs plus the boss at the beginning, but over time that will disappear, and then only the boss will be left, or only a few targets will be left that get repeatedly summoned. So unless you're in like perma 5 targets, to be able to fully take advantage of the energy regen for Blade and Tribi, then of course it just struggles significantly more than it usually would, and then the infinite ult loop gets completely broken, meaning even if you were to invest, let's say 20 plus cost into this team to even try and get it, right? there's a good chance for a majority of the time you won't actually be able to do it outside of pure fiction. Pure fiction is probably the only one you might be able to do it in, since that is a perma 5 target situation, right? And I'd also like to say here, there are some people who are a bit confused on how infinite ult loops act, and I kind of mentioned it a little bit earlier. This only works with teams where people passively gain things without actually having to take their own turn, right? Acheron, she has teammates who can make stacks for her. Fei Xiao, she has teammates who can make stacks for her. Castoris, she gets free stacks from, allies consuming HP, healing HP, or being hit, right? These are the types of kits, the kit direction that leads to infinite ult loops happening. The reason I'm mentioning this is because I've been glazing Sunday quite a bit lately because of the fact that it's likely he's going to get a Nova in the future, and possibly his energy regen capabilities could be buffed to be better than they currently are, because I do feel like they're a bit underwhelming. To be honest, Wo is a better energy regener than Sunday is, in my opinion, right? But a lot of people have been seeing the infinite ult loops and been saying, oh, well, I doubt they're going to do this because then there'd be an infinite ult loop if his energy regen is too good. However, what people don't understand is that's just not how it works. Unlike these other characters where they can gain free resources from allies doing whatever, Sunday is not a character like this, right? Sunday, no matter what, needs to take 3 turns of using his skill in order to regenerate his ultimate, in order to give allies or an ally energy again. He can't gain anything from allies doing a bajillion attacks, or a bajillion damage, or consuming a bajillion HP. So Sunday is not part of any infinite ult loop, right? That's not exactly how it works. They could make him very strong for energy DPSs and highly synergistic with, for example, Saber and Gilga if his buffs become team-wide, but Sunday is not a character that you'd want in infinite ult loop teams. All infinite ult loop teams usually have a thing where everybody can passively gain something from their teammates doing attacks, right? Or doing whatever. You see this with Ashvale. Ashvale gains free energy from allies constantly attacking, meaning he can also, or could also, be used in infinite ult loops, which is exactly what it was, before. You were able to use Ashvale in infinite ult loops with Emblade in his beta. Then they nerfed Emblade's E2, and they got rid of the infinite ult loop temporarily, may I add, because once again, these devs for some reason lack foresight into the characters that they're making a few patches ahead, and now Emblade is responsible for a ton of more infinite ult loops, despite the nerfs that he received, because they just don't think far, right? They really just don't think far enough to be able to understand how kits like these could end up being infinite ult loops. So it's just 100% on the devs' fault, but also, I'm going to be honest, 99% of people who talk about infinite ult loops are never going to actually be able to accomplish an infinite ult loop, and it's kind of getting sickening how much this is talked about, despite how unimportant it is, right? Like, sure, you have these people showcasing you these infinite ult loops, but then you realize they're in private servers because 99% of the player base does not own a team that is this perfectly, built to be able to activate this infinite ult loop. And then also something else that's usually, kind of left out of these talks with the infinite ult loops, oh my god, voice crack, is the relic investment. Usually they require a stupid amount of relic investment into Eagle, right? So with that being said, for this reason, 99% of you are never going to be able to replicate these infinite ult loops, and you really should just not care about it all that much. I don't get why the community is so up in arms about it. The only thing that 100% I understand is calling these devs out for their terrible kit creation. I've come to the realization of this probably since Saridra, right? This game purposely nerfs characters and makes their kits significantly worse on purpose for characters they don't want to shine as much. But then you look at, for example, Cassie Mono Rem and how stupidly broken that is in high cost in comparison to other teams. This game has a clear favoritism towards specific characters, and it's exactly why it's led to all this bullshit happening with infinite ult loops, because usually the characters that they really love are the ones who get all these bullshit passive abilities of being able to generate resources for themselves while the others aren't, right? And they kind of just dug their own grave with this, in my opinion. Now, once again, it's not actually that serious. I'm being a bit exaggerative, but I don't know. Let's see how this ends up going. Are they going to fix the characters who are already in live? Are they going to completely ignore it and not give a fuck because they can't change shit? Are they going to maybe give compensation? I'm interested, right? So let me know what you guys think down in the comments. Hope you all have a great day. Hope you all have a great night. Peace out.